Hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about new European Union battery regulations. Batteries, as we know, form a key part of data centers' uninterruptible power supply, helping protect them from costly downtime. And some of the upcoming changes from the European Union are set to have implications for data centers across the EU. So the key question that we want to answer today is, what do these changes mean for your data center? And I'm delighted to be joined by my Enesys colleagues, Dr. Thomas Verghese, Business Development Manager, and Mr. Luca Cassani, Sales and Marketing Manager, UPS EMEA. A quick disclaimer before we begin. So this video is not legal advice. If you want to read the full version of Battery Regulation 2023/1542, you can do so by clicking the link in the description below. It's also worth mentioning that the regulation is undergoing phased implementation over the next 10 years. So with that in mind, 10 years is a very long time. Some of the details we mentioned may be subject to change. So that's something worth bearing in mind. So the new battery rules are officially known as Regulation 2023/1542. They were adopted and entered into force in 2023. And as I mentioned, the regulations are now undergoing phased implementation. The EU's previous regulation for dealing with batteries, and that has already been repealed. However, parts of it are still in effect to facilitate a transition period. Tom, I want to come to you first. Just explain, why is this change necessary?
Thanks, Alistair. So the directive from 2006 is effectively outdated. We now live in a world where batteries are of increased strategic importance and very much will form part of the society in the future. So battery strategic importance is true for data centers, electric vehicles in particular, but energy infrastructure and other areas as well. And in fact, the EU estimates that global demand for batteries will increase by 14 times between 2019 and 2030. So the new regulation mainly seeks to ensure circularity for all batteries placed on the EU market. So that's considering everything from sourcing of materials, manufacturing, use, and what happens to the battery at the end of its life. Effectively, from manufacturing to disposal, the new regulation contains updated mandates covering the battery's entire lifespan.
Yeah, and we should stress, of course, that there are still a lot of details we don't know about the implementation, and one of those areas, for instance, is the fines that data centers could face for non-compliance. We know that with the Network and Information Systems 2 or NIS2 directive, which was implemented by member states in October 2024, that had a direct impact upon data centers. And we understand that the fines for that were somewhere in the millions of euros. So I think there is a risk of some hefty fines being implemented, and that really underlines why EU data centers need to have an understanding of these regulations, sooner rather than later. So let's talk first of all about what these regulations might mean in the procurement stage. So a lot of the obligations fall on battery manufacturers and importers, but even in the procurement stage, data centers need to do some due diligence. Luca, can you give us some examples of what this means for data centers in practice?
Yes, of course. Procurement due diligence is essential to ensure compliance across the entire lifespan of batteries. In fact, under the Article 7, manufacturers are required to calculate and declare the carbon footprint of batteries placed of the EU market. Moreover, Article 8 states the amount of recycled content which specific battery types must contain. Although these obligations are mainly for the manufacturer, data centers must verify these claims as a part of their procurement due diligence. Procurement of non-compliant batteries could cause problems further down the line.
Yeah, and as I understand it, there are also some due diligence responsibilities with regard to ethical issues. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Batteries placed on the market in the EU have to meet certain standards in regards to human health, human rights. They keen on, let's say, part of the batteries are not, let's say, sourced where let's say forced labor is a of way to labor, let's say, the product.
That covers the procurement stage. I want to talk now about some responsibilities with regard to the deployment of batteries. And one of those areas is battery passports. So we know that all industrial batteries with a capacity greater than 2 kilowatt hours will have to have an electronic record, aka battery passport, and that will involve a QR code which users can scan and access key information about the battery. And we know that this will become mandatory by February 2027. However, understanding what may be required for compliance as soon as possible for data centers is necessary. Tom, can you tell us about what kind of information users will be able to access within the battery passport, please?
Yeah, of course. So by scanning a QR code, users will be able to access information such as manufacturing details. So that's who made the battery, when it was made, and in which factory. Clearly, the specifications, some of which are contained on the labels now, but will increase. Other things that will need to be on that passport will be the environmental impact. So the carbon footprint, the proportion of recycled materials that are used. Included will also be the end of life details and also the compliance document. So a declaration of conformity that supports any CE marking. So that just gives you some of the things that will be available for the end user specifically on the battery passport.
For data centers, well, for instance, the Uptime Institute has done some insightful analysis on this question. So it is likely that data centers will be responsible for updating the information contained with the battery passport. And let's say this responsibility could include regular and accurate maintenance entries, notification of any substantial event or accident affecting the batteries in question, and also the acknowledgement of overcharges, deep discharges, or other deviation from the standard operating condition which may affect the batteries.
Excellent. Yeah. So I think that gives us a really good oversight of what the battery passport will actually mean for data centers in practice. Let's move now to talk more about the end of life stage of batteries, because that's also something that's covered in the regulations. Tom, can you tell us a little bit more about this area and what it might mean for data centers specifically?
So clearly data centers will have to have an understanding of what happens to the product at the end of their life, and in particular what happens to their batteries at the end of their life. While some of the responsibilities may lie with the manufacturers or whoever the end users purchase their batteries from, data centers will need to understand and put in process a place for handling the batteries at the end of their life, Alison.
These regulations, of course, apply to batteries placed on the EU market. But why might economic actors outside of the European Union need to take note of these changes? Let's say, for example, I operate a data center in North America. Why should I care about changes to a set of EU regulations?
Yeah, so I think there are two main reasons why perhaps those outside the EU need to pay attention to these upcoming changes. Firstly, there are supply chain issues. Data centers in North America, for example, and elsewhere will rely on batteries and components coming from within the EU. And in this case, they need to be familiar and understand the regulation, because the due diligence requirements will still apply when they purchase batteries from within the EU. Secondly, we should also consider economic actors looking to expand into the EU. So clearly, the data industry, that anybody in the data center industry who will want to enter into or expanding existing operations in the EU must comply. And I think finally, it's important to remember that the United States and perhaps others will have their own regulations covering batteries, in particular around carbon content and the use of recycled materials. So again, it's up to the end users to understand exactly how regulations apply and may differ critically in different areas, Alistair.
Now about solutions, and specifically how ENESYS can help data centers to comply with the new regulations and, improve their energy efficiency outcomes. So when it comes to the issue of battery circularity, which is one of the main things that these changes aim to tackle, what gives ENESYS TPPL thin plate pure lead technology the edge?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to say that TPPL batteries are comprised of 99% recyclable material, a figure reflected by the BCI, the Battery Council International. Clearly, certain other battery chemistries are recyclable. However, this process can be more costly compared to that of lead acid and TPPL in particular. This means that effectively using alternative chemistries for your data center could make compliance to end-of-life requirements considerably more expensive. Clearly, another advantage is the reduction in total waste, because the TPPL product has effectively a longer lifespan compared to standard AGM batteries, clearly depending on the application. This means that a TPPL battery will typically last 25% longer than perhaps traditional lead acid batteries in any application. In addition, TPPL batteries are more energy efficient in terms of their operation. So effectively, they use less energy to keep them on charge, and as such, that can ultimately lead to less carbon use by the end users, which I think is important to remember. From a customer service perspective, ENESYS also offers recycling programs in the various countries within the EU when the batteries reach the end of life. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think the recycling program in particular can really give data centers peace of mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for today's discussion. I've really enjoyed hearing your insights. If you want to learn more about the new EU regulations in written form, we've done a blog post, so you can visit the ENESYS blog. There's a link in the description to that below. And if you want to find out more about how those ENESYS solutions that we just talked about can help your data center, make sure to get in touch with a local sales representative. Again, a link to that is in the description below. I thank my guests, Dr. Thomas Verghese and Mr. Luca Cassani, for their time today. And we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now. Okay.